Beneath a quiet Chinese hillside lies a sealed palace defended by liquid poison. This is the tomb of Qin, China's first emperor, a monument hidden for over 2,000 years. By the end of this exploration, you will understand how modern science confirmed an ancient legend, and why this ruler's fear shaped his eternal fortress. We will examine the cryptic historical records that speak of mechanical traps and flowing mercury rivers, then reveal the startling physical evidence that proves these stories might be true. This journey offers a window into the mind of an emperor whose quest for control did not end with his passing. What does it mean when our greatest ambitions are buried with us? He was a boy king of 13, inheriting a throne surrounded by fire and steel. This was the Warring States period, a brutal 250-year chapter where 7 kingdoms tore at each other's throats across the land we now call China. For young Huang, the future Qin, this was not just a world he was born into. It was a puzzle he was determined to solve permanently. His method was not diplomacy, but a terrifying, systematic campaign of conquest. One by one, over decades, his armies swallowed the rivals and Qi. Each fell not just to military might, but to a new, uncompromising idea. He did not just want to win battles, he wanted to erase the very concept of separate kingdoms. In the year 221 before the Common Era, the final piece clicked into place. For the first time in history, the vast region was unified under a single, central authority. He declared himself Qin, a title that translates to the first sovereign emperor of Qin. This was more than a name. It was a statement of cosmic scale. He was the beginning of everything. But what does a ruler do after he has conquered the known world? He rebuilds it in his own image. Obsessed with control and efficiency, the first emperor launched a staggering series of standardization projects. Imagine the chaos of 7 different kingdoms, each with their own writing systems, their own currencies, their own widths for cartwheels. Travel and trade were a nightmare of constant adjustment. Qin mandated one script, one currency, one set of laws based on a strict philosophy called legalism, which emphasized harsh punishment and absolute obedience to the state. He even decreed a standard axle width for all carts, so every new road his engineers built would have uniform ruts. This was a man who sought to eliminate friction, not just on the battlefield, but in the very machinery of daily life. His vision was a perfectly synchronized empire, a single organism with himself as the absolute brain. This drive for monumental order extended into the landscape itself. He connected his new empire with a vast network of roads and canals. He ordered the linking and fortification of earlier border walls, creating the formidable precursor to what we now know as the Great Wall, a project of such immense scale it would consume countless lives. And then there was his most personal project. Early in his reign, he commanded the construction of his final resting place, a mausoleum so grand it would become a mirror of his earthly domain. To understand the mercury rivers and the deadly traps within that tomb, you must see them not as isolated marvels, but as the ultimate expression of this man's psyche. Every standardized cart axle, every unified law, every mile of wall was about imposing his will on a chaotic world. The tomb was simply the next logical step. If he could not achieve physical immortality, a quest he pursued with equal fervor through alchemists and potions, then he would craft an eternal kingdom where his sovereignty was absolute, unchallenged, and protected by the most extreme measures imaginable. His entire life was an act of supreme control. His death would be no different. His vision for eternity was not a single chamber, but an entire mirrored world. Spread across an area of nearly 60 square kilometers, the mausoleum complex near modern-day N is a city for the dead, a meticulous recreation of the empire he forged. This was his necropolis, a term meaning city of the dead, and it was designed with the same ruthless precision he applied to his living realm. The central feature is a vast, man-made earthen mound, a great tumulus rising from the plains. This green, pyramid-like hill, still today, is believed to contain the heart of the mystery, the emperor's own burial chamber. But the story radiates outward from that silent center. In the 1970s, farmers digging a well made a discovery that would stagger the world, striking not gold but pottery. They uncovered the now famous army, thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, each with unique facial features, arranged in precise military formation within massive underground pits to the east of the main mound. This was just the outer garrison. Further excavations revealed pits containing magnificent bronze chariots fit for an emperor's procession, stables with horses, and burial sites for officials, acrobats, and concubines. Every element of his court and his military was replicated here, frozen in time and ready to serve him forever. The layout itself was a deliberate map. Historians believe the entire complex was modeled on the emperor's own capital city, with the mound representing the imperial palace at its core. Rivers and waterways were even recreated using mercury. This was not mere decoration, it was a profound cosmological statement. By building a microcosm of his empire, Qin was attempting to transfer his sovereign power into the afterlife. He was not just being buried with treasures, he was being interred with the very structure of his authority. The soldiers were his eternal guard, the bronze chariots his transport, and the mercury rivers, we now believe, served a dual purpose. They symbolized the great waterways of China, yes, but they also formed the core of a legendary and terrifying security system. In this city-sized tomb, every detail had meaning, and every precaution was taken to ensure his rule would never end. For over 2,000 years, our only detailed guide to that hidden palace has been a single, ancient text. Written roughly a century after the first emperor's passing, the Records of the Grand Historian by a scholar named Sima offers a description so specific it feels like a set of architectural plans. He writes of ingenious artisans who rigged the tomb's passageways with automatic crossbows, weapons set to fire at any intruder who disturbed a hidden trigger. And he describes craftsmen using vast quantities of mercury to create a miniature geography within the burial chamber, simulating the great rivers of the empire, even the Yangtze and Yellow River. All set to flow perpetually by some unseen mechanical means. This account is not a dry list of features. It is a story of supreme engineering and paranoid defense, a legend passed down through generations. But how much of it can we trust? Sima was a meticulous historian for his time, but he was also writing under a different dynasty, compiling stories that were already 100 years old. Was he recording a closely guarded state secret, repeating elaborate court rumors, or perhaps weaving a symbolic narrative about the emperor's power over the very land and waters? Historians face a profound challenge here. This one testimony is the foundational blueprint for everything we suspect lies within the mound. It sets the entire historical puzzle, transforming the site from a simple burial place into a legendary labyrinth of traps and liquid metal rivers. For centuries, scholars could only debate the text, with no way to verify its claims. The tomb was sealed, its secrets protected by more than just earth and stone, but by the immense weight of time and mystery. This left a tantalizing question hanging in the air. Was Sima providing a factual report, or was he merely preserving a magnificent myth about the most powerful man his world had ever known? The answer would remain buried, until science found a way to listen to the whispers of the earth itself. The legend remained just words on a page until science learned to read the soil itself. In the 1980s, researchers took a new approach to the silent mound. Instead of digging, they began listening, using advanced geophysical survey techniques to scan the earth beneath the grassy hill. They took core samples, extracting slender columns of soil from across the entire site for chemical analysis. What they found was not just surprising, it was definitive. The mercury levels in the soil above the tomb were radically elevated, in some places up to 100 times higher than the natural background levels for the region. This was no minor trace. It was a major environmental signature, a chemical scream from the depths. More astonishing than the sheer quantity was the pattern it revealed. The mercury was not spread evenly like a general contamination. The high concentration readings mapped out a distinct, flowing shape beneath the mound, a pattern eerily reminiscent of a river system. This was the first physical, measurable clue that Sima's ancient account was more than myth. The mercury rivers were real. The scientific data transformed a 2,000-year-old story into a tangible archaeological fact. Those soil samples proved that an immense quantity of liquid mercury was deliberately placed within the burial complex, and its distribution suggests it was designed to flow. Just as the historical records described, this discovery does more than verify a detail, it changes the entire nature of the mystery. We are no longer asking if the legend is true, but rather, why go to such an extreme? What purpose could a flowing river of poison serve in a sealed tomb, beyond a symbolic map of an empire? The answer may lie in the emperor's twin obsessions. With immortality and with absolute, perpetual security, mercury, known to ancient alchemists as quicksilver, was far more than a mere metal. It was a substance of profound duality, shimmering with both spiritual promise and mortal danger. Within the sealed darkness of the tomb, those flowing rivers served a masterful blend of purposes, each reflecting a different facet of the emperor's monumental ambition. On a spiritual level, the choice of material was no accident. In the alchemical traditions of the time, mercury was considered a vital ingredient in the quest for physical immortality, a key component in elixirs meant to purify the body and grant eternal life. By filling his burial chamber with this magical substance, Qin may have been attempting to complete the transformation he sought in life, creating an environment where his spirit could endure forever. Bathed in the essence of longevity itself. Furthermore, the specific layout of those mercury channels was a deliberate act of cosmic cartography. By simulating the great rivers and seas of his unified empire, he was not just building a map, he was asserting eternal dominion. His spirit would forever reign over this miniature landscape, a perpetual sovereign of all he had conquered, ensuring his control transcended the boundary between life and whatever came after. Yet this beautiful, symbolic act had an utterly practical and terrifying counterpart. Mercury vapor is highly toxic, and a sealed chamber filled with flowing, evaporating liquid metal would create an atmosphere of silent, invisible death. This transforms the poetic rivers into a functional and brutally effective security system. Any robber who managed to bypass the legendary crossbow traps and break into the inner sanctum would be met not with a volley of arrows, but with a creeping, odorless poison. The very air would become a weapon, causing severe neurological damage and likely leading to a swift, confusing end. In this grim interpretation, the mercury served a dual physical purpose as well. Its known antibacterial properties could have been intended to preserve the emperor's physical form, slowing decay in a final, desperate bid for bodily integrity. So within a single ingenious design, we see the full complexity of Qin's mind. The Mercury rivers are at once a spiritual elixir for immortality, a symbolic map of eternal rule, a preservative for his remains, and the ultimate passive trap. It is a perfect fusion of mystical aspiration and ruthless, practical defense, proving that for this emperor, the sacred and the lethal were two sides of the same coin. This obsession with eternal life was not a quiet hope, but a driving force that shaped his final decades. While his engineers built walls and standardized scripts, the emperor dispatched fleets on a far more elusive quest. He sent ships eastward across the sea, commanded to find the fabled islands, a mythical paradise said to be home to immortals who possessed the secret formula for life without end. These expeditions, led by trusted advisors and alchemists, were monumental undertakings, searching for a legend that always seemed to shimmer just beyond the horizon. Back at court, he surrounded himself with practitioners of the mystical arts, magicians and alchemists known as, who promised they could unlock the secrets of the universe for him. They experimented with minerals, plants, and complex chemical processes, all aimed at distilling the essence of longevity into a consumable form. Their most prized ingredient in these elixirs was, invariably, mercury. In the alchemical belief system, this shimmering liquid metal represented the primal, transformative power of the earth itself, a substance that could purify the mortal body and transmute it into an eternal form. Tragically, and with profound irony, the emperor likely consumed this very poison in his pursuit of immortality. Historical accounts suggest he regularly took pills containing mercury and other toxic compounds, prescribed by his court alchemists as the key to prolonging his life. Modern understanding tells us that mercury is a potent neurotoxin, and prolonged exposure leads to severe physical and mental decline, including paranoia, organ failure, and a slow, debilitating illness. It is a heartbreaking twist of fate that the substance he believed was his gateway to eternity may have been the very agent that hastened his end. This context makes the rivers of mercury within his tomb not just a security system or a symbolic map, but the ultimate, tragic fulfillment of his life's deepest desire. He could not carry the elixir of life with him into the next world, so he did the next best thing. He built his eternal palace within it, immersing his resting place in the magical essence he spent his life seeking. The mercury represents the convergence of his greatest hope and his final reality, a monument to an ambition so vast it could only be contained within a sealed hill, guarded by the beautiful, deadly substance that defined his quest. The mercury was only one layer of the defense. Sima's account also speaks of a more immediate and violent safeguard, automatic crossbows poised to strike any intruder. This raises a practical question for modern minds. Could engineers of the 3rd century before the Common Era actually build such a complex mechanical trap system, and could it possibly last? The answer lies not in the sealed tomb, but in the artifacts we have already uncovered from the Qin dynasty's workshops. The technological prowess of this era was staggering. We see it in the mass production of the warriors, each with interchangeable yet unique parts. We see it in the breathtaking bronze chariots, with their perfectly scaled working parts and elaborate canopy that feels like metal lacework. Most tellingly, we see it in the actual weapons buried with the army. Archaeologists have found thousands of bronze crossbow triggers, mechanisms of astonishing precision. These are not simple levers. They are sophisticated assemblies with multiple moving parts, including a self-locking safety catch, all designed to release immense tension with a smooth, reliable pull. The Qin mastered bronze casting to a degree that allowed for standardized, high-performance machinery of war. If they could produce thousands of identical, reliable triggers for an army, the concept of rigging a series of them to a hidden activation system is not far-fetched at all. So how might it have worked? Engineers today speculate on several possibilities. One simple method involves a tension cord system. Picture a network of silk cords or fine wires strung across a corridor at ankle or chest height, nearly invisible in the dark. These cords could be linked to the release mechanisms of pre-loaded crossbows mounted in the walls. The slightest touch would trip the cord, which would pull a pin, releasing the bowstring and firing a bolt. Another method could use a pressure plate system, where stepping on a disguised floor tile would depress a lever arm beneath, triggering the weapon. A more complex design might involve a series of gears, or that translate a light initial touch into a stronger pulling motion to ensure the weapon fired. The real engineering challenge, however, is not the initial build, but the test of time. Could such a delicate system, reliant on organic cords, tensioned sinew bowstrings, and precisely balanced bronze parts, remain functional after 2,200 years in a sealed, damp underground environment? It is highly unlikely the mechanisms would still be operational today. Sinew decays, silk rots, metal corrodes and seizes, yet this may be missing the point. For the first few decades, or even centuries, after the tomb was sealed, those traps would have represented a very real and lethal threat. Their existence, whether fully functional or not, served a powerful dual purpose. On one level, they were a practical, formidable barrier for any early grave robber who discovered an entrance. On another, perhaps more enduring level, they were a psychological weapon woven directly into the tomb's legend. The story of the automatic crossbows, passed down and recorded by Sima, became part of the tomb's aura of inviolability. It created a reputation of certain death for anyone who dared to enter, a reputation that may have protected the site far longer than any decaying mechanical part ever could. Were the traps real? Given the Qin's proven engineering genius, they almost certainly were. But their greatest power may not have been in their springs and bolts, but in the fear they planted in the human imagination for. The sealed chamber remains a deliberate mystery, a puzzle we have chosen not to solve. With such compelling evidence for the mercury rivers and mechanical traps, the most pressing question is not what is inside, but why we have not gone in to see. The answer lies in a profound and patient philosophy guiding modern archaeology in China, often termed passive excavation or protection first. It is a principle of profound respect, acknowledging that our current tools, for all their sophistication, could cause irreversible loss. Imagine the potential treasures within, not just of gold or jade, but of organic materials that have survived in that stable, sealed darkness for over intricate silks, painted lacquerware, delicate wooden artifacts, even the emperor's own garments or texts written on bamboo slips, all preserved in a time capsule. The moment that capsule is opened, the moment modern air, light, and microbes flood in, these priceless pieces could darken, crumble, or disintegrate before our eyes. The very structure of the burial chamber itself, possibly supported by wooden beams or featuring elaborate ceiling murals, could collapse if the delicate environmental balance is disturbed. But the most unique and daunting concern returns to that shimmering, toxic signature in the soil. The core samples suggest an immense concentration of liquid mercury still lies within. Opening the tomb could release a concentrated plume of highly toxic mercury vapor, creating an immediate health hazard for any excavation team and potentially contaminating the local environment. This is not a theoretical risk, it is a chemical reality waiting behind the earthen walls. So, the choice to wait is not one of neglect or fear, but of stewardship. Archaeologists and cultural authorities view the tomb not as a prize to be claimed, but as a legacy to be safeguarded for a future generation that will possess technologies we cannot yet envision. Perhaps invasive imaging that can peer through stone or methods to stabilize artifacts the moment they are exposed. This deliberate pause makes the first emperor's resting place even more compelling. It is a testament that some secrets are so grand, so fragile, that their greatest protection is our own humility, our willingness to let the mystery breathe a while longer. Guarded by the very elements its creator believed would make it eternal, the emperor's fortress was not an isolated act of paranoia, but the ultimate expression of a timeless human instinct. Across the ancient world, rulers shared a common fear that their power and treasures would not survive their own passing. In the deserts of Egypt, pharaohs constructed labyrinths of stone within their pyramids, employing massive granite portcullises designed to slide down and seal corridors forever, and creating networks of dead-end passages and false burial chambers to confuse and exhaust any would-be robber. These were physical, architectural puzzles of immense weight, meant to bar the door with the very mountain itself. Closer in time and place to the first emperor, his successors in the Han dynasty adopted a different, yet equally ingenious, approach to eternal security. Their tombs often featured ceiling walls, not of stone, but of layers of charcoal and white clay. This was a brilliant form of passive defense. The clay created a waterproof barrier, while the thick strata of charcoal acted as a giant desiccant, absorbing all moisture from the sealed chamber to create an environment where organic materials, from wooden coffins to silk robes, could be preserved for, and where the conditions for decay were intentionally halted. Later, during the prosperous Tang dynasty, tomb architects focused on the approach. They built long, sloping passageways, known as spirit paths, that descended deep into the earth. These were not just ceremonial, they were tactical. A long, narrow, downward-sloping tunnel is incredibly difficult to excavate from the outside, requiring immense effort to remove rubble and prevent collapses, making the logistical challenge itself a powerful deterrent. When we place Qin's Mercury rivers and crossbow traps within this global tapestry of tomb security, his methods stand out not for being unique in concept, but for their breathtaking scale and their fusion of the symbolic with the lethally practical. The Egyptian defenses were monumental and mechanical. The hand techniques were about preservation through chemistry. The Tang relied on daunting engineering. The first emperor did all three at once. He combined the mechanical trap, the chemical weapon, and the grand symbolic statement into a single, unified system. His defenses were not just barriers, they were an extension of his worldview, a final decree written in poison and bronze. This ambition set a precedent, a haunting benchmark for imperial security that was less about simply locking a door, and more about ensuring that the door itself became a legend. A story so potent it would guard the silence within for centuries, longer than any stone. While the Mercury rivers form the silent, toxic heart of the complex, the most visible testament to the emperor's ambition lies just to the east. In the spring of 1974, a group of farmers near the city of N were digging a simple well, their shovels striking not water but pottery. They had uncovered the edge of a vast underground chamber, and within it, the silent gaze of a clay soldier. This accidental discovery would unveil the first and most spectacular line of the tomb's defense, the now legendary army. As archaeologists carefully excavated, they revealed not a few statues, but an entire military division frozen in time. Thousands of life-sized infantrymen, archers, and charioteers stand in precise battle formation within a series of enormous pits. Each soldier is unique, with individualized facial features, hairstyles, and armor, suggesting they were modeled on real members of the emperor's formidable army. They are accompanied by hundreds of horses and dozens of ornate bronze chariots, creating a complete, functioning military force. But this was not a monument for the living to admire. This was a functional spiritual garrison. In the beliefs of the time, these clay warriors were intended to magically animate in the afterlife, becoming an eternal army under the emperor's command. Their strategic placement east of the main burial mound was deliberate. In Chinese cosmology, the east was the direction from which potential threats, including evil spirits or rival armies, were most likely to approach. By stationing his legions there, Qin was establishing a permanent perimeter guard for his soul's domain. The sheer scale of this undertaking is breathtaking. Current estimates suggest over 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, and 670 horses were created, each requiring meticulous craftsmanship, massive kilns, and an unimaginable logistical operation. This army validates every story about the tomb's grandeur. If the outer guardians were crafted with such obsessive detail, what does that imply about the treasures and the traps that lie at the complex's silent center? The army is the promise made tangible, a preview in clay and bronze that whispers of the wonders, and the warnings waiting within the unopened mound. The silent mound guards its secrets, but we are learning to see through stone. Without ever touching a shovel, scientists are now using a suite of invasive technologies to map the unseen world beneath the earth, acting like medical scanners for the landscape itself. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy into the soil, listening for the echoes that bounce back from changes in density, revealing hidden walls or hollow chambers. Magnetic surveys detect subtle variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried structures, like fired bricks or large metal objects, painting a picture of what lies below. Even satellite imagery, observing from hundreds of kilometers above, can detect minute changes in vegetation health or soil moisture that betray the presence of vast, man-made foundations below the surface. Together, this high-tech detective work is assembling the most detailed blueprint of the tomb complex we have ever possessed. The data is startlingly clear. It suggests the burial mound is not a simple heap of earth over a single chamber, but rather a colossal, layered pyramid of rammed earth, built with stepped, fortified walls descending deep into the ground. Beneath this, the scans hint at a sprawling underground palace structure, a labyrinth of numerous chambers and connecting passageways, a subterranean mirror of the Imperial court above. The technology can even identify potential voids, empty spaces that could correspond to grand halls, treasure rooms, or the rumored reservoirs designed to feed those flowing Mercury rivers. This is no longer guesswork based on ancient texts. It is a digital excavation. Researchers are using this flood of data points to construct intricate three-dimensional models of the entire complex, turning invisible history into navigable maps. We can now visualize the probable layout, the scale of the chambers, the potential pathways an intruder or an emperor's spirit might take. Each anomaly on the scan is a question, a ghostly outline waiting for its story to be told. This remote sensing brings us to the very threshold of discovery, allowing us to peer into the darkness with X-ray eyes, proving that some of the greatest revelations in archaeology now come not from digging, but from listening intently to the whispers of the earth. The prospect of opening the tomb forces us into a difficult and necessary conversation. It is a choice between two profound responsibilities: the drive to uncover human history and the duty to preserve it. On one hand, the potential knowledge locked inside is unimaginable. This sealed palace could rewrite our understanding of early Chinese technology, art, medicine, and statecraft. It could hold texts on bamboo slips, lost literature, or administrative records that illuminate the daily workings of the world's first centralized empire. The scientific and historical value is incalculable, a direct window into a pivotal moment for all humanity. Yet, the counterargument carries immense cultural and ethical weight. For this site has remained as its creator intended, a complete and undisturbed system. To excavate is to fundamentally alter that state, to intervene in a ritual act that was meant to be final. Many argue there is a deep respect in leaving certain mysteries untouched, honoring the cultural practice and the individual's final wishes, even those of an emperor from a distant age. This is not merely about avoiding physical damage. It is about acknowledging a spiritual and historical continuity that our curiosity could permanently sever. The dilemma asks us, as a global community, who decides when the pursuit of knowledge oversteps the boundary of reverence? And are we prepared for the consequences, not just of what we might find, but of the act of finding it itself? Beyond the philosophical debate lies a staggering practical challenge, one that makes the tomb's defenses eerily modern. We must confront the environmental legacy of the emperor's design. Scientific surveys suggest the presence of not just symbolic streams, but potentially hundreds of tons of liquid mercury. Safely breaching the chamber would require containing a volatile, toxic substance on a scale never before attempted in archaeology. The immediate risk to any excavation team from mercury vapor is severe, but the broader concern extends to the surrounding ecosystem and water table. Any mishap could create a lasting environmental issue, turning an archaeological site into a hazardous materials containment project. This transforms the question from can we open it to should we open it, knowing the immense and potentially irreversible cost of failure. The mercury is no longer just a historical curiosity, it is a 21st century problem waiting in a 3rd century chamber. This leads us to a quieter, more reflective question. Does some knowledge truly belong to the past? The first emperor orchestrated every detail of his resting place as a final, absolute statement of control. His entire complex, from the garrison to the poisonous rivers, was a deliberate act of sealing, a command for eternal solitude and sovereignty. By choosing not to excavate, we are not admitting defeat to a puzzle. We are making a conscious decision to respect a narrative that has endured for more than 2,000 years. We are preserving the tomb not just as an artifact, but as an idea, a testament to the lengths one human will go to shape their own legacy. In this light, the greatest act of understanding might be to listen to the silence we have been gifted. To let the mound remain a green hill under an open sky, a monument not only to what we know, but to all we have chosen for now to leave unknown. The ultimate guardian of the first emperor's secrets may not be crossbows or poison, but our own collective wisdom, recognizing that some doors are best left closed, not out of fear, but out of profound respect for the story they keep. The line between history and legend blurs when a story lives for thousands of years. Over the centuries, the tale of the first emperor's tomb has been retold, each generation adding its own layer of wonder and speculation. In popular folklore and modern films, the burial chamber is often depicted as a cavern of unimaginable splendor, with ceilings inlaid with pearls to mimic the night sky and rivers of silver. Not just mercury flowing through jeweled landscapes. Perhaps the most persistent legend is that of the perpetual lamp, a magical flame said to burn forever without fuel, illuminating the emperor's eternal domain. These are powerful, romantic images, born from a human desire to make the extraordinary even more magnificent. They speak to our fascination with the ultimate hidden treasure, transforming the archaeological site into a mythic underworld straight from a fantasy epic. Yet, this process of embellishment presents a unique challenge. It can obscure the genuine, and in many ways more profound, achievements of the past by burying them under a mountain of glittering fiction. The true task of modern archaeology is not to chase these myths, but to carefully sift through them, separating the poetic exaggeration from the physical truth waiting in the soil. This critical perspective is not about diminishing wonder, but about redirecting it. When we look past the gem-encrusted ceilings of legend, we find a ceiling of rammed earth and stone, a feat of engineering that has held firm for over two. That reality, the sheer scale and endurance of the actual construction, is its own kind of miracle. The evidence we do have is astounding enough to stand without fictional adornment. The Mercury anomaly is not a symbolic river in a storybook. It is a measurable chemical fact that confirms an ancient written record. The army is not a rumor of clay soldiers. It is a tangible, silent legion of thousands, each face a unique portrait from a lost world. These discoveries are not less impressive because they lack magical lamps. They are more impressive because they are real. They represent the coordinated effort of countless individuals, the pinnacle of Bronze Age technology, and the tangible will of a ruler whose vision shaped history. By appreciating what we can prove, the staggering scale, the confirmed mercury, the precision of the pits and artifacts, we engage with a deeper, more authentic mystery. We are left to wonder not about fantasy pearls, but about the real texts that may lie preserved on bamboo slips, the true layout of the subterranean palace hinted at by ground scans, and the exact mechanisms behind those legendary crossbow traps. The power of this site lies precisely in the tension between what we know and what we may never fully uncover. The legends satisfy our imagination, but the archaeology invites us into a genuine detective story, where every soil sample and radar echo is a clue in the greatest unsolved puzzle of the ancient world. The Emperor's final command created a paradox that still lingers in the soil. His most potent defense, the shimmering mercury rivers, have cast a long and poisonous shadow far beyond the tomb's sealed walls, transforming an ancient security system into a modern environmental concern. Scientific teams continuously monitor the mound, not for archaeological signals, but for chemical ones. They track subtle emissions of mercury vapor seeping from the earth, a faint, toxic breath exhaled by the tomb after more than two. While current readings suggest the levels are contained and managed, the very presence of this vapor confirms a sobering reality. The barrier meant to protect a king in death has become a persistent element in the local ecosystem, requiring ongoing vigilance to ensure it does not impact the groundwater or the health of the surrounding landscape. This creates a silent dialogue between past and present, where modern environmental science must engage with an ancient alchemical hazard, managing the legacy of a decision made over 2,000 years ago. This toxic footprint points back to a human cost paid long before the tomb was sealed. The historical records are silent on their fate, but we can infer the grim reality for the artisans and laborers tasked with implementing the emperor's grand design. Handling liquid mercury without any protective equipment, likely pouring it into the intricate channel systems day after day, they would have been exposed to catastrophic levels of the poison. The symptoms of chronic mercury poisoning are horrific, a slow unraveling of the mind and body. It begins with tremors in the hands, a loss of coordination, and a creeping numbness in the limbs. Then comes the neurological decline, marked by intense anxiety, memory loss, and dramatic personality changes, often accompanied by kidney failure and a gradual shutting down of the body's systems. These workers, the anonymous engineers of eternity, probably suffered these very ailments, their health sacrificed to create the immortal environment for one man. Their silent hardship adds a deeply human layer of tragedy to the technological marvel, a reminder that the price of this eternal fortress was measured not only in treasure, but in prolonged and unrecognized suffering. This connection threads the ancient mystery directly into urgent contemporary conversations. The first emperor's tomb stands as a stark, early example of a toxic legacy, where a material chosen for its symbolic power and utility has outlasted its creator's dynasty by centuries, requiring active management today. It mirrors modern challenges with industrial waste, chemical pollutants, and nuclear materials, substances created for a specific purpose that then persist in the environment, posing risks for generations to come. The mercury within the mound forces us to consider the longevity of our own choices. What materials are we using today that might become the hazardous puzzles for future archaeologists to solve? How do we balance innovation with responsibility for the long-term footprint we leave? In this light, the tomb is more than a historical site. It is a case study in permanence. The emperor sought an eternal safeguard, and in a way he succeeded, but not in the manner he intended. He created a monument that continues to speak, not just of imperial power, but of the unintended and enduring consequences of human ambition. A poisonous echo that asks us to think carefully about what we build and what we leave behind. The army is only the most visible part of a much larger story. While the silent soldiers capture our attention, excavations in the outer pits of the complex have revealed a world of astonishing diversity, offering a clearer glimpse into the emperor's vision for his eternal court. In 1980, archaeologists made another landmark discovery just west of the main mound, uncovering two large, exquisitely crafted bronze chariots, each drawn by a team of 4 bronze horses. These are not simple models. They are half-scale replicas of the emperor's actual processional vehicles, masterpieces of ancient metallurgy that boggle the mind with their complexity. Built from thousands of individually cast bronze pieces soldered together, the chariots feature working parts, like rotating axles and doors that swing on tiny hinges. They are adorned with intricate designs and inlaid with lavish amounts of gold and silver, depicting cloud patterns and mythical creatures. One chariot, known as the High Chariot, was designed for open-air inspection, while the other, an enclosed carriage, was likely meant for more private travel. These chariots were not merely buried treasure. They were functional vehicles for the emperor's soul, ensuring he could travel in appropriate splendor throughout his afterlife domain. Beyond military and transport, the pits contained everything needed to run a complete imperial household. Archaeologists found suits of stone armor, meticulously fashioned from hundreds of small limestone plates linked with bronze wire, a ceremonial and perhaps spiritual protection for unseen guards. Other pits held a fascinating array of figures that bring the court to life, not as warriors, but as civil servants and entertainers. There are statues of bureaucrats, seated calmly with an air of authority, ready to administer the eternal empire. There are strongmen and acrobats, frozen in dynamic poses, suggesting the tomb complex included provisions for perpetual entertainment and ritual performance. Perhaps most evocative are the pits containing life-sized figures of rare birds and animals, like cranes and ducks, crafted from bronze and. This was a spiritual menagerie, a collection of prized creatures to populate the gardens and parks of the underworld palace. Each of these finds, from the bureaucrat to the bronze crane, serves as a critical piece of evidence. They demonstrate that the first emperor's plan was breathtakingly comprehensive. His afterlife was to be a perfect, functioning mirror of his earthly reign, complete with a full government, a military, transportation, entertainment, and even a natural world under his control. If the outer pits, meant for subordinates and supporting elements, contained such exquisite and varied treasures, it forces a staggering implication about the unopened central chamber. The logic is inescapable. What magnificence was reserved for the emperor himself? The artifacts we can see, masterful as they are, were likely crafted from durable, earthly materials like bronze, pottery, and stone. But historical records from the period describe the emperor's fondness for jade, often linked with immortality, and for lavish use of gold and silver. It is a reasonable, even cautious, speculation that the innermost sanctum could contain furnishings, artifacts, and perhaps even the emperor's own accoutrements, made from these precious, perishable materials. The opulence of the outer perimeter sets a standard, quietly insisting that the greatest treasures and the most profound secrets still lie protected within the silent, mercury-guarded heart of the mound. Waiting in a darkness we have only begun to understand. Behind every stone and every river of mercury lies a story written in human toil. While we marvel at the grand design, we must also listen for the echoes of those who built it. Historical records, primarily the work of the historian Sima, offer a staggering figure. He writes that over 700,000 workers were conscripted from every corner of the newly unified empire and forced to labor on the mausoleum for nearly 40 years. This was not a workforce of volunteers, but a vast, rotating pool of peasants, soldiers, and convicts, pulled from their homes and families to serve the emperor's final, monumental ambition. To grasp the scale, imagine the entire population of a major modern city, every man, woman, and capable individual dedicated to a single construction project for a lifetime. These individuals moved millions of cubic meters of earth, fired countless figures, and handled toxic materials, all under the harsh discipline of the Qin state. Their labor was the true foundation upon which this wonder of the ancient world was built. The work was not only immense but perilous. Beyond the dangers of construction and the mercury exposure, ancient texts hint at a darker conclusion. Some accounts suggest that after the emperor's burial ceremony was complete, the innermost craftsmen and laborers, those who knew the exact layout of the traps and the location of the treasures, were themselves sealed inside the tomb. This was presented not as an act of cruelty, but as the ultimate security measure, ensuring that the complex's most sensitive secrets died with them. Whether this specific account is literally true or a symbolic expression of the project's finality, it underscores a chilling reality. For the emperor, the integrity of his eternal palace was paramount, and the lives of those who built it were ultimately expendable in its defense. This human cost provides a sobering and essential counterpoint to our fascination with the treasures and traps. The mausoleum is not merely an archaeological site, it is also a memorial to collective hardship. It stands as a testament to what an absolute ruler could command, and the immense price paid by ordinary people to fulfill a vision of immortality they would never share. When we look at the silent army, we might also remember the unseen army of hands that shaped each figure. When we ponder the flowing mercury rivers, we can consider the unknown workers who poured that liquid metal, likely suffering for it. This perspective does not diminish the achievement, but deepens our understanding of history. It reminds us that the greatest monuments are often mirrors, reflecting not only the glory of the powerful, but also the quiet, forgotten sacrifices of the multitude. Their story is woven into the very soil of the mound, an indelible part of the legacy that asks us to remember the full weight of the past. The tomb's design was a map of the universe itself. To see it as merely a fortified treasure chamber is to miss its deepest purpose. Ancient Chinese cosmology viewed the world as an ordered system where heaven and earth were intimately connected, and the emperor served as the crucial link between these two realms, the Son of Heaven. His mausoleum was constructed as a physical manifestation of this belief, a sacred instrument to maintain that cosmic harmony even after his passing. Scholars studying the layout believe the entire necropolis was a deliberate microcosm, a miniature model of the cosmos. The great earthen mound at the center did not just cover a burial chamber, it symbolically represented the axis of the world. In this view, the emperor's final resting place was designed to be the earthly counterpart to the pole star, the fixed, unmoving point in the night sky around which all the other stars appear to revolve. His eternal spirit would become the stable center of the spiritual universe, maintaining order just as he had in life. This celestial symbolism extended to the very materials within. The legendary Mercury, rivers take on a breathtaking new meaning under this lens. While they mirrored the great terrestrial waterways of his empire, they may have also represented something far grander, the silvery band of the Milky Way arching across the heavens. Imagine the intended scene within that sealed darkness, a ceiling perhaps inlaid with pearls or precious stones to map the constellations, beneath which shimmering quicksilver channels traced the path of the celestial river. This transforms the tomb from a security complex into a cosmic engine. The flowing mercury was not just poison or a map. It was the dynamic, life-giving fluid of the cosmos in motion. A magical substance, ensuring the perpetual circulation of energy and power around the emperor's spirit. This integration of astrology and architecture is known as geomancy, the practice of aligning human structures with the invisible forces of the landscape and the heavens to attract good fortune and repel misfortune. The tomb's location, its orientation, and its internal symbolism were all meticulously planned to create the most auspicious and powerful environment possible. Every choice, from the direction the army faced to the placement of the bronze chariots, was likely part of this sacred geometry. This cosmological interpretation answers a profound question: why go to such impossible lengths? The answer is that the tomb was not a final destination, but a launch point. It was a vessel designed for a smooth transition and an eternal reign. By replicating the cosmos and placing himself at its immutable center, Qin was attempting to engineer his own apotheosis, his transformation into a permanent celestial sovereign. The traps and the mercury were not just defenses against robbers, they were protections against chaos, against the spiritual disorder that might disrupt his journey or challenge his rule in the next world. In this light, the entire monumental effort was an act of supreme spiritual logistics, building a bridge between the human and the divine that was meant to last for all eternity. The mound is not just a hill covering a tomb, it is a silent temple to a forgotten view of the universe, where stone, earth, and poison were woven together into a prayer for immortality written across 56 square kilometers. Yet for all its cosmic symbolism, the tomb was also a very earthly target. The Qin dynasty's collapse was as swift and violent as its rise. Following the first emperor's passing, his successor proved unable to control the simmering discontent across an empire built on forced labor and harsh law. Rebellions erupted, and among the most formidable rebel leaders was a nobleman named Xi'an. Historical texts recount that his forces, in their campaign against the Qin, descended upon the Imperial Necropolis. They are said to have looted the outer precincts, seizing whatever treasures they could carry from the above-ground temples and auxiliary pits, and setting fire to the visible wooden structures. The army, buried and forgotten, likely escaped their notice, but the surface was. The critical question, however, is what happened at the central mound. Did Xi'an's soldiers break the seal? The consensus among historians is a probable and resounding no. The sheer scale of the earthen pyramid, estimated to be over 100 meters high at the time, would have made locating a hidden entrance a monumental task in itself, let alone excavating through layers of rammed earth while potentially under threat from rival forces. The historical records themselves are ambiguous, often blending fact with political propaganda meant to discredit the fallen Qin. Most scholars interpret the accounts to mean the destruction was limited to the outer, accessible parts of the complex. The heart of the tomb, the sealed chamber, likely remained intact, its entrance concealed and protected by the very mountain of earth meant to symbolize his connection to the heavens. Over the subsequent the tomb's location faded from common knowledge, becoming the stuff of local legend. There were almost certainly other attempts, small-scale digs by treasure seekers across the centuries, drawn by the same stories that fascinate us today. The landscape is dotted with robber holes from various eras, shallow pits that give up pottery shards or minor artifacts, but none show evidence of a coordinated, successful penetration of the central burial chamber. Modern archaeological surveys of the mound itself reveal a remarkably undisturbed soil structure. There are no signs of the large, messy tunneling that would indicate a major historical breach. This long history of failed attempts is not an accident. It is a testament to the success of the original design. The combination of physical barriers was profoundly effective. The hidden entrance, the immense volume of packed earth, and the terrifying reputation of the traps within created a deterrent that worked for generations. The fear of what might lie inside, of automatic arrows and poisonous air, became as much a part of the tomb's defense as the mercury itself. This enduring inviolability adds a final, powerful layer to the legend. It means that when, and if scientists ever choose to enter, they may not be following in the footsteps of ancient looters. They could be the very first to cross that threshold in over 2,200 years, stepping into a space that has known only silence and darkness since the day it was sealed. The tomb stands not just as a monument to an emperor's power, but as a rare victory for permanence in a world of constant change. The legacy of this silent mound now echoes far beyond the quiet fields of N. In 1987, the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor, encompassing both the central tomb and the army pits, was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This designation recognized it as a place of outstanding universal value to humanity, a site that belongs to all peoples of the world, regardless of territory. It cemented the tomb's status not just as a Chinese national treasure, but as a pinnacle of our shared human heritage, a story too significant to belong to any single nation. This global recognition opened a gateway, transforming archaeological fact into the raw material for global imagination. The tomb's most dramatic elements, the Mercury rivers and the silent clay army, have marched straight from history books into the heart of popular culture. They appear as spectacular backdrops in major motion pictures, where adventurers navigate poisoned chambers to confront ancient curses. They form the immersive landscapes of video games, where players solve puzzles amidst legions of soldiers come to life. Best-selling novels weave intricate plots around the tomb's secrets, casting it as the ultimate prize for historians and thieves alike. In these stories, the historical setting often becomes a stage for action, with the Mercury traps serving as deadly obstacles and the warriors as mystical guardians. This creative reinterpretation is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it ignites worldwide fascination, drawing millions to a story they might otherwise never encounter. It ensures the first emperor's name and his monumental project live on in the modern mind, sparking curiosity that can lead to deeper learning. Yet these dramatizations inevitably prioritize thrilling adventure over archaeological nuance. The complex, spiritually motivated design of the tomb frequently gets into a booby-trapped treasure vault. The profound human cost of its construction is overshadowed by swashbuckling escapades. This reshaping influences public perception, sometimes leaving audiences with a sense of the tomb as a fictional wonder rather than a real and deeply fragile archaeological site. But this cultural resonance is powerful proof of the story's enduring grip on us. The tomb has successfully transcended its origins, evolving from a historical mystery into a versatile icon of adventure. It taps into universal themes of hidden knowledge, eternal rest, and the extreme lengths of human ambition. By fueling genres from historical fiction to fantasy gaming, it guarantees that each new generation will encounter this ancient tale, ensuring that the silent emperor's fortress continues to captivate the world. Not through scholarly journals alone, but through the timeless language of storytelling and wonder, the solution may lie not in shovels, but in particles from deep space. One of the most promising frontiers in invasive archaeology is a technique called muon tomography. It relies on a constant, natural rain of cosmic rays from the universe, particles called muons that pass harmlessly through everything around us, including you right now. These subatomic particles can penetrate hundreds of meters of solid rock, but they are slightly absorbed or deflected by very dense materials, like metal or stone. By placing ultra-sensitive muon detectors around and beneath the tomb mound, scientists could, in theory, create a three-dimensional image of the interior's density. It would be like taking an X-ray of the entire hill, revealing the ghostly outlines of chambers, passageways, and even large metal objects like bronze statues without ever making a scratch. This method has already proven successful in peering inside pyramids in Egypt and mapping volcanic chambers, offering a tantalizing blueprint for the first emperor's sealed palace. Yet the challenge here is unprecedented in scale and complexity, requiring a grid of detectors and years of data collection to piece together a clear picture from these whispers of the cosmos. Alongside cosmic rays, engineers dream of microscopic ambassadors. The vision involves developing ultra-resilient, miniature robotic probes, perhaps no larger than an insect, equipped with micro-cameras and sensors. These devices would be designed to navigate through the tiniest of existing fissures or through purpose-drilled boreholes thinner than a pencil, entering the chamber as silent, invisible observers. Once inside, they could map the environment with lasers, analyze the air chemistry for toxins and age, and send back the first real-time images of a space untouched for. The technological hurdles are immense, creating machines that can operate in total darkness, withstand potential humidity or corrosive gases, and transmit data back through solid Earth. But the race is on in labs around the world, driven by the ultimate archaeological prize, a chance to see without touching. This pursuit extends to the air within the chamber itself. Specialized drones, engineered to be intrusive and chemically inert, could one day float through the cavernous halls, their soft lights illuminating what ground-based robots cannot reach, creating a full digital twin of the entire subterranean realm. This global scientific endeavor is a quiet revolution in how we approach the past. It shifts the fundamental question from should we open it to how can we see inside while keeping it perfectly sealed. Every research paper on advanced sensor arrays, every breakthrough in nanorobotics brings that dream closer to reality. The preservation mandate, once seen as a barrier, has now become the catalyst for a new wave of innovation. Scientists are not just waiting for better tools, they are actively inventing them, motivated by a shared understanding that the tomb is a unique and fragile test case. The goal is a complete virtual excavation, a data-rich model so detailed that scholars could walk through it in virtual reality, study the placement of artifacts, and analyze the flow of the Mercury rivers. All from a computer screen half a world away. This patient, technologically brilliant path offers a profound hope that within our lifetimes, we might finally gaze upon the heart of the first emperor's domain, not by violating its silence, but by listening to it with the most sensitive ears science can devise. The greatest discovery may not be a treasure chest, but the method itself, a new way to honor and explore the deepest secrets of history. The drive to build an eternal fortress is a story told across the ancient world. From the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of Peru, powerful rulers shared a common dream: to construct a bridge to the afterlife so grand and so secure that their power would never fade. When we place the first emperor's MERCURY-Guarded mound within this global tapestry, we see not an isolated marvel, but a particularly intense expression of a universal human urge. Take the pharaohs of Egypt's New Kingdom, who abandoned the conspicuous pyramids for a hidden necropolis, the Valley of the Kings. They carved their tombs deep into the limestone cliffs, creating elaborate, descending passageways decorated with sacred texts meant to guide them through the underworld. These too were fortified spaces, sealed with massive, ton-stone portcullises and filled with dead-end shafts designed to confuse and trap robbers. Their investment was total, mobilizing entire generations to create a hidden city of the dead, a spiritual stronghold against oblivion. Across the Mediterranean, in the Macedonian kingdom of northern Greece, the tomb of King Philip II, father of Alexander the Great, reveals a similar obsession. Discovered undisturbed in the 1970s, this royal burial contained breathtaking gold and ivory artifacts, a testament to wealth and artistry. But it was also a fortified chamber, a stone-built vault covered by a great earthen tumulus, a design echoing the first emperor's own mound. The king was interred with full military regalia, and alongside a companion, practices reflecting a belief in continued status and protection in the next life. Even in the coastal valleys of ancient Peru, the Moche lords constructed immense adobe pyramid platforms, their summits holding lavish tombs filled with ceremonial regalia and sacrificed retainers, all intended to serve the ruler's journey and maintain the cosmic order. In every case, we witness the same profound themes: the investment of a civilization's greatest resources into a single resting place, the creation of a symbolic geography mirroring the cosmos or the kingdom, and the incorporation of practical defenses, both physical and spiritual, to ensure eternal security. What makes Qin's project stand apart is the breathtaking convergence of all these elements on a scale that dwarfs most contemporaries, and his choice of a uniquely potent material as the centerpiece. Where others used stone blocks, hidden doors, or spiritual curses, he engineered rivers of liquid poison. This global lens reframes his ambition. His fears were not unique. Every ruler who built such a tomb confronted the same terrifying void of mortality. His aspiration for legacy was a human one. but his response was to engineer a solution of staggering literal and symbolic complexity, using the cutting-edge science of his age, alchemical mercury, to address the oldest question of all. His tomb becomes the ultimate case study, showing us how one culture, at the height of its power, chose to answer the universal human yearning for permanence, crafting a legacy not just in stone and clay, but in flowing, shimmering, and deadly metal. His profound distrust was not an abstract trait, but a daily reality shaped by fire and steel. From the moment he took the throne as a boy king in a fractured land, Qin lived under the constant shadow of betrayal. Historical records note multiple direct attempts on his life, including a famous incident where an assassin posing as an envoy nearly succeeded. Managing to grasp the emperor's robe with a concealed weapon before being subdued. This was a ruler who could trust no one, not even his own court. His response was a lifestyle of perpetual motion, a habit of constantly traveling between his many palaces spread across the realm, never sleeping in the same location for more than a night or two. This was not mere imperial touring, it was a tactical evasion, a deliberate strategy to make himself an impossible target for any conspirator lying in wait. This ingrained paranoia extended to the world of ideas. In a brutal episode known as the burning of books and the burying of scholars, he ordered the destruction of philosophical texts from rival schools of thought and reportedly took severe action against intellectuals he perceived as critical of his absolute rule. His fear was not just of physical daggers, but of ideological dissent, of any narrative that could challenge the singular story of his authority. This psychological landscape is the essential key to understanding the tomb. The Mercury rivers and the crossbow traps were not merely engineering solutions to a security problem. They were the physical crystallization of a lifetime of looking over one's shoulder, transformed into architecture. They represent his deepest anxieties, poured into liquid metal and carved into stone. Every hidden trigger was a manifestation of his suspicion that someone, somewhere, was always approaching. The poisonous atmosphere within the chamber was the ultimate extension of his belief that the very air around him could not be safe. In this light, the mausoleum becomes more than a grand project. It becomes a deeply personal fortress, the only place where this perpetually vigilant ruler could finally design a world he could completely control. He could not eliminate every threat in the living realm, no matter how many walls he built or how many miles he traveled. But in the realm of eternity, he could engineer absolute safety. The tomb's defenses are therefore a direct translation of his psyche, a brilliant yet tragic attempt to build a sanctuary where the paranoia that defined his life could finally, and permanently, be put to rest. He sought to create an environment where his spirit would never have to flee, never have to doubt, because every conceivable threat had been anticipated and neutralized by design. This transforms our view of the entire complex from a monument to power into a monument to fear, a sovereign's attempt to bury his own deepest anxieties along with his physical form, encasing them in an everlasting vault of his own devising. The landscape itself was the first and most enduring line of defense. The Great Mound does not rise from a random plain, but nestles deliberately at the northern foot of Mount Li, a dramatic range that forms a natural, protective crescent to the south and west. This placement was no accident of convenience, but a calculated act of geomancy, the ancient practice of harmonizing human structures with the spiritual energy of the land. Known as this philosophy sought to channel beneficial forces, or qi, while deflecting harmful ones. The site was chosen with meticulous care, for it presented a near-perfect arrangement. Mount Li provided a solid, embracing backrest, symbolizing stability and protection from malevolent winds. To the north, the Wei River flowed, representing the vital, life-giving water element essential for prosperity in the afterlife. The tomb was positioned like a grand seat, cradled between the mountain's strength and the river's flow, designed to gather and hold auspicious energy for eternity. This was not superstition. It was a form of spiritual engineering, where the very mountains and rivers were conscripted into the emperor's eternal security detail, creating a macro-scale fortress long before a single shovelful of earth was moved. This chosen plot then underwent a transformation of staggering physical effort. The mound we see today is not a simple pile of dirt, but a meticulously constructed pyramid of rammed earth. The technique known as involved building wooden frames and packing them with layers of moistened earth, often mixed with sand, gravel, and binding materials. Teams of laborers would then use heavy ramming poles to pound each layer to an incredible density, creating a man-made geology as hard as soft stone. This process was repeated thousands of times, building the structure layer by compacted layer, like the rings of a tree recording decades of toil. The result was a monument of formidable integrity, resistant to erosion and incredibly difficult to penetrate. Within this earthen mass, archaeologists suspect the builders integrated further barriers. Based on findings from other royal tombs of the period, it is likely that the central burial chamber and its network of halls were lined with thick walls of clay or stone, creating a sealed box within the rammed earth shell. These inner walls would have served a critical dual purpose, structurally reinforcing the chambers and acting as a containment vessel for the liquid mercury within, preventing it from simply seeping away into the surrounding soil. This layered architecture turns the entire mound into a kind of nested puzzle, a geographic onion where each stratum, from the mountain at its back to the pounded earth of its core, served a specific role in protection and preservation. Visualizing this helps us move beyond the idea of a mere burial hill. We must see it as a complete, engineered landscape. The mountain was its shield, the river its moat, and the mound itself a manufactured mountain, a symbolic axis built by human hands. Every slope, every layer, every chosen material contributed to a single goal, creating an environment that was spiritually potent, structurally immutable, and utterly impervious. The geography was not a backdrop, it was the foundation of the entire endeavor. The first and largest component in a security system that blended the spiritual power of the earth with the ruthless ingenuity of humanity. This understanding transforms a quiet green hill into a testament of intention, a permanent mark on the planet designed to outlast empires, built from the very bones of the land it was meant to command. This historical silence is itself a profound clue. While archaeologists have unearthed tens of thousands of Qin dynasty bamboo slips, these fragile records speak of everything except the tomb. They detail grain taxes, legal statutes, and military deployments with bureaucratic precision, offering a vibrant snapshot of a functioning empire. Yet on the subject of the century's largest construction project, one that consumed 700,000 lives, these administrative documents fall utterly silent. There are no supply requisitions for Mercury, no workforce rosters for the mound, no architectural plans for crossbow mechanisms. This is not an accident of preservation, it is a deliberate void. The absence screams of a secrecy so absolute it became a state policy. Knowledge of the tomb's inner workings was likely compartmentalized, with different teams knowing only their specific task, and the master architects answering solely to the emperor. Upon the project's completion, the most sensitive records were probably destroyed by order, a final security measure to ensure that the full blueprint existed in only two places, within the sealed mound itself. And in the mind of its creator, now gone, this makes Sima's account 100 years later even more remarkable. His detailed description suggests he had access to surviving oral traditions, or perhaps fragments of archival material that escaped the purge, records that have since vanished into time. We are left, then, in a fascinating position of triangulation. On one point, we have the single, vivid narrative of a historian writing long after the fact. On another, we have the hard, material evidence of mercury in the soil and the army in the pits. And in the middle, we have this vast, echoing silence from the Qin's own meticulous record keepers. That silence is the emperor's final command echoing across the centuries, a successful attempt to erase the instructions for his own eternal fortress. It forces us to rely on the marriage of science and story, where ground-penetrating radar confirms ancient poetry, reminding us that sometimes what a civilization chooses not to write down is as telling as what it inscribes in stone. The sealed darkness of the central chamber holds the ultimate question. Based on the emperor's meticulous nature and the fragments of history we possess, we can build a reasoned, if speculative, picture of what that inner sanctum may contain. Sima's account speaks of palaces and towers built underground and replicas of the realm. This suggests not a single room, but a series of interconnected halls, perhaps representing different administrative or residential areas of his capital, all arranged around the emperor's final resting place. The ceiling, he writes, was inlaid with pearls to represent the constellations, while the floor modeled the empire's geography with its mercury rivers. This creates an image of a microcosm under a permanent, jeweled night sky, a complete universe in miniature. Within this symbolic landscape, the emperor himself would have been the central fixture. Given his well-documented belief in jade's power to preserve the body and protect the spirit, it is highly plausible he was interred in a suit made of thousands of jade plaques, meticulously threaded together with gold or silk. Such jade burial suits have been found in later Han Dynasty tombs for royalty, and for the first emperor, the pioneer of so much, his suit would have been the most magnificent of all. A second skin of stone meant to grant eternity. Surrounding him would be the functional and ceremonial items of his eternal rule. We can envision bronze braziers that once held perpetual flames, now cold. Lavish lacquerware tables and screens, perhaps inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Stacks of ceremonial weapons, swords and daggers with jade hilts, symbols of his authority. His personal treasury would likely be present, not merely as wealth but as a resource for the afterlife, containing hoards of gold ingots shaped like turtles, ornate silver vessels, and carved jade ornaments of mythical beasts. One of the most tantalizing possibilities is a library. The Qin dynasty was a period of immense bureaucratic record-keeping, and the emperor, despite the book burning, was a man who valued information. The chamber could contain archives on bamboo slips, detailed records of his reign, maps of the empire, or even philosophical texts he wished to keep for himself. These fragile slips, preserved in the stable, sealed environment, could offer a direct, unedited voice from the founding of China, a historical treasure beyond any precious metal. There is also the somber possibility, suggested by practices of the era, that the chamber contains the resting places of close family members or key attendants. Individuals meant to accompany him in service or in kinship into the next world. These speculations, while grounded in historical context, must remain just that, informed guesses. They are shadows cast by the light of what we have found outside the central mound. The ultimate truth is that every imagined jade suit, Every stack of bamboo slips, every glittering heap of gold, exists only in the realm of possibility. The chamber guards its reality with a silence more profound than any legend. This informed speculation does not cheapen the mystery, it deepens our respect for it. It reminds us that the greatest discoveries are not always about confirming what we suspect, but about being utterly unprepared for the reality that awaits. The tomb's final secret may be something no historian has yet dared to imagine. For the emperor and his people, the world did not end at the edge of the grave. The spiritual landscape of the Qin period was one of profound continuity, where death was not an end but a transition to another form of existence, a realm that mirrored the living world in every essential detail. This was not a vague heaven of clouds and harps, but a concrete parallel dimension where one would need all the same things required in life, provisions, servants, a home, and most critically, protection. The afterlife was a direct extension of one's earthly status, and for a sovereign who had unified the known world, his requirements for the next life were accordingly vast. This belief system was anchored by the practice of ancestor worship, a cornerstone of Chinese spiritual life for the well-being of the family, and the state was thought to depend on the contentment of those who had passed on. A properly honored ancestor could intercede with higher powers, bringing blessings and prosperity. Conversely, a neglected or worse, a disturbed spirit could become a restless, malevolent force, capable of bringing illness, drought, or misfortune upon the living. The tomb, therefore, was far more than a memorial. It was a permanent residence, a sacred vessel designed to maintain the emperor's power and placate his spirit for all eternity. Within this framework, every element of the mausoleum takes on a deeper, more urgent meaning. The army were not inert statues, they were spiritually activated guardians. The bronze chariots were functional vehicles for his soul's journeys. The palaces and rivers were his eternal dominion. This context transforms the Mercury and the traps from mere security features into spiritually necessary defenses. Their purpose was dual, operating on both a physical and a metaphysical plane. On the physical level, they were there to protect the emperor's corporeal form, his corpse, from desecration by grave robbers. But on the spiritual level, they served a far more crucial role, safeguarding the emperor's Hun, his ethereal, intellectual soul that journeyed to the afterlife. Malevolent forces, both human and supernatural, could threaten this journey or his peaceful existence in the next world. The flowing mercury, seen as a magical, transformative substance, could create a boundary against such spiritual corruption. The crossbow traps were not just mechanical devices. They were a manifestation of his enduring authority, a warning to any spirit or entity that might think to challenge him in his new domain. His peaceful and powerful existence in the afterlife was not a hopeful wish, it was a societal imperative. A content and powerful emperor spirit meant a stable cosmos and a prosperous dynasty. A disturbed one meant potential calamity for the entire empire he left behind. This belief that the next world was just as real and important as the present one explains the unimaginable scale of the project. The labor, the resources, the ingenuity, it was all a logical, necessary investment in cosmic stability. The tomb was the ultimate act of statecraft, a final, monumental effort to ensure the emperor's transition was seamless, his rule uninterrupted, and his spirit eternally placated. Securing the harmony of both the seen and unseen worlds for generations to come, the warriors we see standing in silent formation were not found that way. When archaeologists first broke into those underground pits, they were met with a scene of catastrophic collapse. Centuries of pressure from the earth above had caused the wooden roof beams to rot and give way, crushing the army beneath tons of soil and timber. The result was a field of fragments, a heartbreaking puzzle of countless broken pieces, where a single figure could be shattered into hundreds of shards scattered across the floor. The patient work of resurrection began, a task that continues to this day. Conservators must first carefully clean each fragment, then begin the monumental matching game, searching for edges and colors that align, slowly gluing a warrior back together, piece by tiny piece. Over months or even years, but the challenge goes far beyond reassembly. When the figures were first created, they were painted in vibrant, lifelike colors, with detailed facial features, armor, and clothing rendered in pigments made from minerals and plants. Upon exposure to the dry air of the modern world, that ancient paint, after being sealed in a humid environment for 2, can curl and flake off in a matter of minutes. To combat this, scientists developed a revolutionary conservation technique. As soon as a fragment with paint is uncovered, it is immediately treated with a special preservative, and then kept in a climate-controlled case that replicates the exact humidity and temperature of the buried pit. A tiny artificial slice of the past created to save it. This meticulous, almost surgical care is reserved for the outer guardians, the clay soldiers meant to stand in the open. Now consider what this implies for the unseen heart of the complex. If the and bronze from the perimeter require such extraordinary intervention, the potential contents of the central chamber present a conservation challenge of an entirely different magnitude. Inside that stable, sealed environment, shielded from fluctuations in temperature and humidity, could lie organic treasures that have survived intact since the dynasty's fall. Delicate silks from the emperor's robes, woven with intricate patterns, lacquered boxes and furniture, their surfaces gleaming with designs that could vanish upon contact with dry air. Wooden architectural elements, musical instruments, or texts written on bamboo or silk, all preserved in a state of suspended animation. The moment the chamber is breached, that perfect, ancient climate vanishes. The very air we breathe becomes an agent of decay. These priceless artifacts could darken, warp, or crumble to dust before a camera could even focus, turning a moment of discovery into one of irreversible loss. This is the sobering technical reality that guides the hands of archaeologists and historians. The decision to wait is not born from a lack of daring, but from a profound understanding of stewardship. It is a promise to the future, a commitment that, when we finally look upon the first emperor's inner world, we will do so with the tools to truly see it, to preserve every thread of silk and every stroke of ink, ensuring that the story they tell is not lost in the very instant it is found. The tomb was not a private indulgence, but a state project of staggering economic scale. Think of the resources required to sustain 700,000 workers for nearly 4 decades. They needed food, shelter, tools, and clothing, all supplied by an empire still recovering from centuries of war. The logistics alone would have strained the imperial treasury, a constant drain of grain from state granaries and cloth from imperial workshops. Then add the material costs, the thousands of tons of bronze for weapons and chariots, the clay and wood for the army, the rare pigments for their paint, and of course, the immense quantities of mercury, a substance valuable and difficult to procure. This was not merely spending wealth, it was converting the living capital of a newly unified state into a monument for a single individual. The project functioned like a massive economic engine, but one that produced nothing for the living, consuming labor and materials that could have been used to build roads, irrigate fields, or fortify borders. In this light, the mausoleum stands as the ultimate symbol of concentrated power, a physical measure of what an absolute ruler could commandeer from his realm. Its construction was an act of economic sovereignty as profound as any tax or law, demonstrating that every resource, human and material, ultimately belonged to the throne. This mirrors the construction of the Great Pyramids in Egypt, where the pharaoh's divine status justified marshaling the entire kingdom's output for a single, eternal purpose. Both projects served as vast public works that employed thousands, but also as profound statements that the ruler's journey to the afterlife was the nation's most important civic duty. The difference lies in the context. The Qin dynasty had just emerged from brutal conflict, and its people were weary, its institutions fresh and untested. The emperor's vision, while unifying in spirit, placed an unbearable physical burden on the very society he had just forged. This leads to a compelling and tragic irony. The tomb was designed to project eternal stability, a fortress for an everlasting dynasty. Yet the immense effort required to build it may have fatally weakened that dynasty's foundations. The relentless conscription of labor took farmers from their fields, disrupting agriculture and sowing resentment across the provinces. The heavy taxes needed to fund the project squeezed a population, already exhausted by war and grand construction projects like the Great Wall. By the time of the emperor's passing, the empire was a taut wire, vibrating with hidden strain. His death cut the tension, and the wire snapped. Rebellions erupted swiftly, fueled by the very hardships his monumental projects had created. The Grand Mausoleum, meant to secure his legacy forever, instead became a contributing factor to his dynasty's startlingly rapid collapse within a few short years. It is a profound historical lesson, written in earth and mercury, that a system which concentrates too much resource and energy on a symbol of its own power can forget to sustain the living reality that gives that power meaning. The tomb thus embodies a dual legacy. It is the peak of Qin organizational genius and artistic achievement, a testament to what unified China could accomplish. But it is also a memorial to the fragility of authoritarian overreach. It unified China in life through force and vision, yet in demanding such a supreme sacrifice for death, it may have helped unravel the very unity it was meant to eternally represent. This adds a deep layer of poignancy to the Silent Mound, a monument that witnessed both the height of an empire's ambition and the swift, silent footsteps of its demise. Mercury's shimmering duality made it a global language of transformation. Long before it flowed in the emperor's tomb, this liquid metal captivated cultures across the ancient world. In Rome, artisans prized a brilliant red pigment called cinnabar, the mineral form of mercury sulfide, grinding it into powder to paint vivid frescoes on the walls of villas and public buildings. This same vibrant red was essential in China for sealing important documents with stamps and for coating exquisite lacquerware boxes, a color associated with life, luck, and high status. Beyond its visual power, mercury was fundamental to early metallurgy, used to extract gold and silver from ore through a process called amalgamation, literally pulling precious metals from the earth. This practical magic cemented its reputation as a substance of profound power, a bridge between the mundane and the miraculous. Within Chinese alchemical thought, this symbolism deepened into a complete philosophy. Alchemists saw the universe as a dynamic interplay of energies, and mercury, with its paradoxical nature as a liquid metal that could dissolve gold, embodied the ultimate agent of change. It represented the feminine, receptive principle of yin, constantly flowing and adaptable, often paired with sulfur, which represented the masculine, active yang. Their union was believed to spark the creation of the elixir of life. For an emperor obsessed with conquering death, mercury was not merely a material, it was the very essence of potential, the fluid from which immortality could be distilled. This rich symbolic vocabulary transforms our view of the rivers within the tomb. They were a grand alchemical diagram etched in quicksilver. Their flow mirrored the circulation of vital energy, or qi, through the body of the empire and the cosmos, a perpetual motion meant to sustain the emperor's spirit. The mercury did not just map geography, it enacted a process. It was a spiritual engine, its shimmering currents designed to catalyze the emperor's final and greatest transformation, from a mortal ruler into an eternal, celestial sovereign. To see it only as poison or preservative is to read a single word in a vast, luminous text. The rivers were a sentence written in the language of symbols, a prayer for metamorphosis cast in liquid metal, flowing silently in the dark, waiting for a change that was meant to last forever. The mechanics of those mercury rivers present an engineering puzzle as mesmerizing as the substance itself. How do you make a liquid metal flow perpetually in a sealed, underground palace? The ancient text speaks of Mercury simulating the 100 rivers and the Great Sea, mechanically flowing. The word mechanically is the crucial clue, suggesting not a still pool, but a dynamic, engineered system. One compelling theory points to the Qin dynasty's mastery of hydraulics and bronze casting. They could have constructed an intricate network of bronze pipes and channels, creating a closed loop for the mercury to travel. To power this flow, engineers might have used a simple yet effective gravity-fed system. Imagine elevated reservoirs, perhaps hidden in upper chambers of the tomb, filled with mercury. Opening a sealed gate would allow the dense liquid to pour down through the channels, mimicking the rush of a river, before collecting in a lower basin meant to represent the ocean. From there, a manual or even water clock-driven pump, a technology known in rudimentary forms at the time, could slowly lift the mercury back to the upper reservoir to begin the cycle again. This would create a continuous, if not perpetual, flow for as long as the mechanism was maintained. Another possibility is more symbolic, yet still ingenious. The mercury may not have flowed in a constant stream, but could have been designed to shimmer with the illusion of motion. If the channels were subtly sloped or ribbed, and if lamps or reflected light were strategically placed, the mercury's own reflective surface would ripple and gleam with any slight vibration, creating a dazzling spectacle of liquid light that gave the impression of a living river without complex machinery. This invites a deeper question about the ancient account itself. When Sima wrote of mechanically flowing rivers, was he describing a literal, pump-driven marvel? Or was he using poetic language to convey the breathtaking effect of seeing those shimmering channels in the flickering torchlight? The Qin engineers were undoubtedly capable of either. Their bronze chariots with working parts and their standardized crossbow triggers prove a society capable of precise mechanical innovation. Yet maintaining such a system in a sealed tomb presents its own stark reality. Mercury is volatile. It evaporates slowly even at room temperature. In a sealed space, those vapors would have created a toxic atmosphere, but they would also mean the liquid volume was gradually diminishing over the centuries. Any pump made of organic materials like leather or wood would have decayed long ago. Any water clock would have run dry. This leads to a sobering technical truth. The mechanically flowing system, if it ever existed, almost certainly fell silent within a relatively short time after the tomb was sealed. Its glory was likely brief, a magnificent performance for the funeral rites, not an eternal motion. This does not diminish the achievement, it reframes it. The true ingenuity may have been in the initial effect, the grand statement of a ruler who could command rivers of metal to flow at his burial. The engineering celebrates a moment of transcendent spectacle blending mechanical ambition with alchemical symbolism to create an experience that was so powerful. Its memory survived as legend for 2,000 years. It asks us to appreciate the Qin engineers not as builders of perpetual motion, but as masters of transformative theater, who used bronze, mercury, and genius to build a bridge between the solid earth and a flowing dream of eternity. The silence surrounding the tomb is not merely ancient, it is a tradition that continues to this day. The culture of secrecy that once protected the emperor's plans with imperial decrees now operates through modern policies and controlled access. The site remains one of the most carefully managed archaeological zones in the world, with research permits tightly regulated, and the central mound itself strictly off-limits to any form of intrusive excavation. This creates a fascinating dynamic where the flow of information to the global public is as carefully channeled as the Mercury rivers were meant to be. Major discoveries, like new pits or significant artifacts from the perimeter, are often announced through official state media channels after lengthy study, presenting a polished narrative of the past. The raw data, the ongoing debates, the tentative hypotheses that form the daily work of researchers, these often remain within academic circles for years. This selective release adds a distinct, contemporary layer of mystery to the ancient one, shaping what we know and, just as importantly, when we come to know it. Within China itself, the tomb sparks vigorous and thoughtful debate among historians, archaeologists, and cultural officials. One school of thought champions an aggressive pursuit of knowledge, arguing that the technological means to safely explore the central chamber may soon be within reach, and that the historical imperative to learn outweighs the risks. Others advocate for a philosophy of permanent preservation, viewing the unopened tomb not as a challenge to be solved, but as a sacred trust to be honored. A symbol of cultural patience and respect for the past in its complete state. These discussions are complex, weighing national pride, scientific ambition, and deep-seated cultural values about how to treat the resting places of ancestors. For the international community and the fascinated public worldwide, this means our understanding arrives in carefully curated waves. We learn of a new figure type or a breakthrough in paint preservation in moments of official revelation. The process feels less like a continuous stream of discovery and more like receiving chapters of a book, published only when the authors are completely ready. In this way, the first emperor's resting place remains, in a very real sense, a state secret. It is guarded now not by crossbows and poison, but by research protocols, preservation ethics, and deliberate policy. The echo of his desire for absolute control resonates in these modern halls of academia and governance, reminding us that some stories are considered so precious. Their telling must be meticulously managed across centuries. This enduring legacy of secrecy ensures that the final chapter of this story, the moment the central chamber is ever revealed, will be one of the most carefully orchestrated acts of archaeology the world has ever seen. These separate marvels were not random features, but interlocking components of a single, brilliant design. We can understand the tomb's security not as a list of wonders, but as a unified, multi-layered fortress, each tier reinforcing the next in a system of profound depth. The first and most enduring layer was not physical at all, but psychological, woven from the very stories told about the place. The legend of the automatic crossbows and the rivers of poison, passed down through generations, created an aura of certain death. This reputation served as a powerful deterrent long before any explorer even approached the mound, turning the site into a place of fear and superstition in the public mind. It was a defense built from words, and it proved remarkably effective for centuries. Should anyone overcome that fear and approach, they would confront the second layer, the staggering scale of the physical structure itself. The man-made mountain of rammed earth, the hidden entrance, and the sheer logistical challenge of moving thousands of tons of soil presented a barrier that would exhaust and discourage all but the most determined and well-equipped forces. This was a defense of pure manpower and mass, a monument so large it became its own obstacle. If an intruder somehow breached that outer shell and found a passage inward, they would then face the third layer, the realm of mechanical ingenuity. Here, in the darkness of the inner corridors, the legendary traps awaited. Trigger wires, pressure plates, and preloaded crossbows created a lethal maze, where a single misstep could mean a swift and violent end. This layer relied on precise machinery and the element of surprise, a final active guard for the sanctum's threshold. But the ultimate defense lay within the inner chamber itself, a fourth and final layer of environmental security. This was not a trap one could see or avoid. Upon entering the burial chamber, any tomb robber would be enveloped by an invisible, odorless killer, the toxic atmosphere created by evaporating mercury. This was a passive, all-encompassing weapon, a poisonous fog that targeted the very act of breathing. It required no trigger, no maintenance, and offered no escape once inside. Viewed together, this holistic system reveals of ancient defensive thinking. It combined psychological warfare, monumental architecture, mechanical engineering, and alchemical chemistry into a single, seamless strategy. Each layer covered the weaknesses of the others. The legend protected the mound when armies were away. The mound's mass protected against casual looting. The mechanical traps protected against organized breach teams. And the mercury atmosphere provided a final, absolute safeguard, even if all other defenses were overcome. This integrated approach would have been virtually impregnable with the technology of the time, a perfect storm of deterrence designed to function for eternity. It transforms our view from a tomb with traps into a singular security masterpiece, perhaps the most sophisticated ever conceived in the ancient world. The true genius was not in any one element, but in their orchestration, a final, silent symphony of protection composed for an emperor who sought to command not just an empire, but time itself. The question of the sealed chamber extends far beyond our own time, reaching toward horizons we can barely glimpse. Will that earthen mound ever be opened? The answer may not lie with our generation or even the next. Perhaps a century from now, archaeologists will wield tools of pure energy and light, scanners so advanced they can resolve the texture of silk and the ink on bamboo from outside the tomb walls, rendering the physical breach unnecessary. They might deploy swarms of molecular-scale machines designed to stabilize artifacts the instant they are exposed to air, preserving every detail in a perfect digital twin. Or perhaps the honor will fall to explorers 1,000 years in the future, members of a civilization whose understanding of preservation and ethics has evolved in ways we cannot predict, for whom our current debates seem as distant as the Qin dynasty feels to us. There is a profound possibility, however, that the tomb may never be excavated at all. It could remain a permanent mystery, a deliberate legacy of the unknown, a time capsule whose designated audience is not us, but a far future humanity with capabilities and questions we cannot yet conceive. This long-term perspective is quietly humbling. It places our burning curiosity within the vast, slow-moving river of human history, reminding us that we are merely one chapter in a much longer story of inquiry. Our role today is not to claim the final answer, but to be careful stewards, preserving the question intact for those who will follow. This shifts how we see the silent hill. It is not a locked door we must force open, but a message in a bottle, cast into the stream of time by an emperor who sought eternity. We are the ones who found it washed up on the shore of the present, and we must decide whether to open it now or let it continue its journey. This encourages us to see ourselves as part of an ongoing narrative of discovery, where the thrill is in the pursuit as much as the prize. The true meaning of the first emperor's tomb may not be contained in the treasures it holds, but in the endless conversation it inspires across. The answers, it seems, belong as much to the future as they do to the past, and our greatest contribution may be to ensure the question remains alive, echoing from our age into the next, and the next forever. The mound's silent vigil is a monument to the paradox of ambition itself. For over 2,000 years, the tomb of China's first emperor has guarded its secrets with a perfect balance of legend and science, of poison and poetry. We have traced the path from cryptic historical records to the startling chemical truth in the soil, from an emperor's profound fear of mortality to the modern world's profound respect for his final resting place. This is more than an archaeological site, it is a conversation across centuries. The elevated mercury levels are a whisper from the darkness, confirming that the ancient stories of flowing rivers were more than myth. While the unbroken seal of the central chamber is a reminder that some truths are still sovereign, still protected by the very weight of time and our own humility. This enduring mystery does not simply ask what is inside, it asks us who we are as explorers. It pits our relentless curiosity against our duty to preserve, our desire for answers against the wisdom of leaving some questions to the future. The tomb stands at that crossroads, a silent teacher reminding us that history is not always a puzzle to be solved, but a story to be respected. A legacy that gains power from both what is revealed and what remains forever hidden. Perhaps in the end, the greatest treasure is not the jade or gold that may lie within, but the enduring lesson the site imparts, that the most profound human legacies are those that command our awe not through possession, but through mystery. They challenge us to look beyond the simple acquisition of knowledge toward a deeper understanding of our place in the long, unbroken chain of human wonder. If this journey into the heart of an ancient enigma has captivated you, the story of human ambition is written across the globe in stone and legend. Explore our other videos on lost civilizations and forgotten wonders, and share your perspective with us below. Given everything we now know, do you believe the tomb should remain sealed for the ages, or does our pursuit of understanding justify the immense risk of opening it? The debate, like the Mercury rivers, continues to flow.